Today's video is going to be another quick one, and we're going to talk about the force velocity curve and touch on how speed training can make you strong. So something that's ignored quite a lot in, I suppose, context of getting fit, building muscle and becoming strong outside of sports. This is really ignored a lot. Within sports, it's becoming quite common, and rightly so, to, I suppose, incorporate contrast training, ballistic training, and more speed training that's in line with the velocity part of the curve as opposed to the force part, the heavier lifting. So it's just going to be a look over how incorporating ballistic training leads to gains and can lead to gains. So again, it isn't gospel or anything, but it is definitely helpful in muscle, getting fit, building lean tissue, etc. So as we move on, just let this load. So it has become mainstream as of late. This is especially in the sports performance world, incorporating ballistic training, body weight training, focusing more on speed and quality of output rather than just lifting heavy and trying to change, I suppose, your physiology totally. There has become this big emphasis on power, speed, strength and speed training. So the methods of just a quick overview. Ballistic training is basically explosive training. A lot of you would have seen it with slam balls, jumps, kettlebells, different things like that, where you're moving something with intent quite fast, and it's usually quite a light weight. And then contrast training is pairing heavy movements with light explosive movements. So maybe a 3-rep heavy deadlift paired with 3 tuck jumps, which are reactive touch and go, or 3 different plyos, or mixing box squats with pogo hops and things like that. So that's contrasting the 2 different methods. So working off of strength, speed, or maximal strength to start, then going straight into speed, strength, or speed. So the Soviets in the 1950s were practicing these methods as they utilized the speed curve quite a bit. And this was mainly to do with Olympic weightlifting at the time. They were not just focused on the force or the total volume. Obviously, they did a lot of volume during the day, and the drugs definitely allowed for that, and the steroids. But in saying that, the training methods were there, that they still focused on the speed. They focused on speed strength. They focused on increasing their power or max power output. And it wasn't just all about the weight they were moving at the end of the day. So the study that I'm going to look at is in the Journal of Strength and Conditioning in 2008, and the study was the effects of combined ballistic and heavy resistance training on maximal lower and upper body strength in recreationally trained men. So it's important that these were recreationally trained. This group of men that they took on weight trained maybe 3 days a week and had been for quite some time, quite a few years. So I suppose this eliminated any sort of novice gains or newbie gains of bringing a group of men in who never trained before and then seeing these extreme jumps in percentages, because obviously it's a new stimulus to them. So that's kind of important to the study, that they were already trained. So what it did was it compared heavy lifts versus contrast lifts. So it compared the two, and it did an upper and a lower, and it used squat jumps and the height as a measurement. But for the upper body part on the 3-day program, they geared toward the bench press. So one group, the traditional strength group, just went for bench press, and they worked off of the building to heavies. They worked off of maybe 70% higher and just worked on getting heavier and heavier. The contrast group paired heavy bench press with plyometric push-ups. So as soon as they were doing their sets, they might do, let's say, 3 sets of a heavy bench press at 85% and go straight into plyometric push-ups. Unsure of the details of how they did it, but I know they paired the two. Both groups increased their 1-rep max, but the traditional strength group increased theirs by 7.1%, which is still quite good considering they were a trained group of men. But the other group, who went through this contrast program, had an 11.6% increase on average. So I suppose the first thing you should ask yourself is why. In reality, it does make sense. So as you are improving your, I suppose, or giving more time towards the speed end of the force speed curve, you're improving your rate of force development. So your rate of force development, or ROFD, is trained here on the velocity side of the curve, and that's given time, and it's been given, I suppose, some work, whereas the other one was just looking at the force. According to Henneman's size principle, force comes with bar velocity and using explosive strength recruits more motor units, and recruiting more motor units leads to many more things. So it's to do with your type 2 fibers. Recruiting more units means you're using more muscle, means as a result you should be building more muscle mass, etc. So there's a lot of knock-on effects when people say recruit more motor units. Now this Henneman's size principle is definitely something I can and will touch on more. It's going to be a whole slide of its own hopefully down the line. I suppose that's what's handy with these videos, but I'm just going to brush over it for now and basically explain that that's what the principle means. Your type 2 fibers are recruited a bit more. You're learning to move with intent at speed as it is a skill. So a lot of times when people start off their phase, they look at the force velocity curve and they look at the lower end and they think, rather than speed, they think endurance. They think, I'm going to go low weight, high reps here, and I'm going to build that up. And then as I progress, the weight is going to go up, the reps are going to come down, and I'm going to build up to that force part next. But what they kind of ignore is that it isn't endurance. High reps, just because it's light doesn't mean it needs to be high reps. It can be light, fast, low rep, and it can be pushed with intent. That it's not just because you're bench pressing 30 kg doesn't mean you got to do 20 reps to get the benefit of it. I mean, if you're pushing that for 3 to 6 reps with pure intent, controlling the way down, pausing for a second, exploding up, we're talking about that stretch shortening cycle, which again, we can talk about down the line, and I talked about it in my muscle fibers video, that if we're utilizing those, you don't have to bring yourself near fatigue with a lighter weight in order to get the benefit. You're still going to be training. You're just not going to be training, I suppose, the heavier part of the curve. You're going to be training the speed part of the curve. So it's funny, in a lot of courses and a lot of different, I suppose, certs you could get in any sort of personal training or S&C, everyone looks to the force velocity curve. It's one of the first things that come up. Everyone acknowledges its importance, and then they go about their days ignoring anything to do with the velocity side, especially outside of sports performance. Now, within sports performance, obviously, if you're doing an S&C cert, there's going to be huge amount of time given to that because we know the value of it now. But I'm talking about outside of that in terms of building muscle, building more strength, and the benefits you can get outside of sport from training this velocity style of training. So a few other benefits. Learning to, I suppose, do this means you're improving your ability to absorb force. Now, this isn't with all, I suppose, speed drills. This is mainly with plyometrics, jumps, and things like that, that your ability to absorb force increases. And it's the same with the next one. I'm really kind of talking toward the plyos and bodyweight jumps and movements and stuff. When I look at the first 2 points, like your ability to react to force. So again, being able to drop off of a box and a depth jump, react to the ground and absorb the force, react and jump again. Things like that. It gives you a bit of a guide and it gives you exposure to learn how to tap into that energy system, so that type 2 energy system. It builds resilience in ligaments and tendons, especially through plyos. It's quite low skill. Anyone can kind of do it. I mean, I can get someone in the gym and they can do a seated vertical jump pretty simply. It's a high return on investment for such a low skill, which I really like. So, I mean, if I can elicit a response from someone without having to go through this huge barrier, such as learning a new skill, I mean, I'll jump for that straight away. So if I want to train your type 2 muscle fibers and want to train your explosive strength, I mean, am I going to bring 2 newbies in and am I going to go through the power clean or hang snatch or hang power snatch with them? Or am I going to get them to learn how to do depth jumps, plyos, max broad jump, things like that are quite low skill, and you're going to elicit pretty much the same response as a beginner, especially from. So it can be microdosed for effectiveness. So again, this is something I talk about in another video as well, where I look at the type 2 muscle fibers, and it's something that doesn't need to be done a whole lot of. Now, the frequency is important. So obviously once every 3 weeks isn't going to be great, but I mean, once a week or twice a week is going to be a huge benefit to the general public. And when I say microdosed as well, when I say once a week, I don't mean you got to do 5 sets of 10 reps. I mean, at the start of the session, when you're warmed up a little bit and ready to go, 3 sets of 3 reps on any sort of jump or explosive ball slam or anything like that is going to be enough to elicit the response you want to get from that. It takes the emphasis off load for a change. So a lot of people can only see progression through load, which obviously the end goal for a lot of people is to improve their lifts, improve their main lifts, get stronger. Obviously, load is important, but it is nice to change it up a little bit and give that value or that intent to speed instead. So learning how to move a lighter weight with pure quality and intent is important. Even just moving your own body weight with intent. And again, it's kind of learning a new skill at the same time that it takes the emphasis off the load for a while, which leads me to the next one, that it can be used as a lower fatigue training. So obviously, look, if you're in the gym 3 or 4 days a week and 2 of those days are quite heavy, you can dedicate the other 2 days to just this sort of ballistic style of training. Gives your body a bit of a break. The sets are short, reps are fairly short. The rest times are long. It's ideal really for someone who, if they're going to go for another heavy session or two, that might put them into a big state of fatigue. It's a nice way to train around that as well. And it's very useful for sports performance. So again, I think that goes without saying. People really see the value of in-season programming now, that you can't just be going doing heavy lifts for a hell of a lot of reps and putting yourself in that state of fatigue, that you have to work down through the force velocity curve, get onto your lighter weights, move them with intent, move them with pure quality, and make sure that you're training the right energy systems and not putting yourself into a hole as the season goes on. So again, not too important, the sports performance, because this isn't really what I'm talking about, but definitely needs to be touched on. So the main points again are very, very simple. Train all sides of the force velocity curve. So everyone's given so much time to this force side of the curve. Everyone's focusing on weight, volume, whereas you shouldn't be afraid to bring things down, focus on intensity, focus on intent, focus on speed. Give some time to that, give time to both. You can train them together, be it not in the same session, you don't have to, but across the week, across a 2-week plan, you can fit all in. And you shouldn't have to go to the gym and bury yourself every day to gain muscle. There are going to be days where this kind of stuff is going to give you a hell of a lot of value, and it definitely can. You can speed train yourself strong.